Hello and welcome to Opinionated Marketers with me, Kiran Kapur, and Charles Nixon, founder of the Cambridge Marketing College. Charles, I went off on a rant last week about innovative products, but we were actually working our way through the PESTLE model. So we've done politics and we've previously done economics, so we thought we would tackle social this week.
Yes, indeed. There are many issues here that marketers need to consider, dependent obviously on the sectors that they are in. But generally speaking, the social climate is quite dynamic, and we need to think very clearly as to what elements we want to get involved in. There are obviously comments and statements that can be made about diversity or inclusion, and there are elements about age profiling and the ethics of the way in which the marketplace works. So we need to think quite clearly as to which are the most important for us and how these perhaps impact on consumer psychology and the way in which people now approach buying. I suppose the most important one to consider is the overall age profile of the UK and indeed of most Western or advanced nations, but also including some nations in the third world. So generally speaking, we are an aging planet. As a proportion of the planet, a considerable number of people are now over 45, and the average age of the planet is creeping up. This has implications for marketers on the basis that, historically speaking, let us say from the times of most mass marketing from the 60s onwards, it has been a youth culture, a teenage culture, and a 20s culture that we appealed to. And the natural assumption has always been that that culture is the one we should continue to appeal to, as it is the growth market. That isn't the case necessarily these days, and we need to look clearly at the age profiles of our marketplace. The 2021 census has just started to be released by the Office of National Statistics, and there's a very good section on their website which allows you to see various sections of the UK as well as the UK in total in the age profiles that now hold. Indeed, I think probably the thing that I would say is what we used to find was that the age profile was more or less a pyramid with a larger number of people at the younger stage at the bottom and a smaller number of people at the older stage at the top. Now it is very much what's often referred to as a kite, or indeed you can see it as a cliff, with a smaller number of people at the lower end and a fairly reasonable bulge of people around the sort of 55 to 65, and then it tapers off really around the 75 age point. A very nice interactive graphic can be found for each county, where you can see the county against the national average.
But I mean, you're right. Obviously, the UK census has just been released, but actually it is a phenomenon in many other countries. Italy very recently has been very openly talking about the fact that they have an ageing population, openly talking about the problems that the ageing population brings. Japan has whole areas where there are just no young generation at all. It is becoming quite a different world. There's two things that opens up. There is a change in social attitudes, perhaps, and there is also a demand for different types of products and services and requirements. And there is also, one has to consider, and it's partly an economic point, where the wealth sits in a marketplace. And the wealth tends to sit at the older end.
It certainly does, because we've gone through a period of the three-stage life, as it used to be talked, where you basically were educated, you worked and you retired. And during that working period, we accumulated considerable amounts of wealth because the requirement was for getting on for 30 plus years worth of retirement. And therefore many people now sit on fairly large pension pots. This is not going to be the case going forward, and indeed people are going to have to work longer and there'll probably be at least a 4 and possibly even 5-stage life as people go through various stages of the work profile. There is a significant discussion at the moment about whether or not retirement is something that is likely to happen in the future, or indeed is desirable to happen in the future, because many people like the idea of working into older age. And so we find there are significant business opportunities now in the age groups that are coming to their 70s. And indeed still have significant amounts of money, and of course they now have the time. Frost and Sullivan has a particularly useful piece of research which is looking at all the marketplaces for the sort of 75 plus market, one of which is significant growth in the automated car market. And obviously there is a significant amount of tourism being done for what's known as the silver tourist market, or the medical tourist market, the multi-generation tourist market, the wellness tourist market, and the anti-aging tourism, to name but a few.
Yes, it does. From a marketing perspective, it opens up a whole wealth of marketplaces. The interesting part is one of the problems marketers have traditionally had is that it tends to be quite a youth-driven profession. So there was always a view that anybody over the age of 30 was over the hill. So we tested products on people that were younger. That is clear, and products, slogans, pricing, everything. That is definitely going. I'd be intrigued to know, and I've not managed to find the age profile of the marketing profession and how that now looks, because I suspect it has changed.
That's a very
Certainly over the period of time we've been teaching, I think you would say that there are different ages of people that we now teach.
Yes, though it's an interesting question when you ask it, because I can think back and I can think of some quite interesting people who were certainly in their 40s who went through the college in the early days. It then became very much more a young female market, and there are now groups of people who are going back into education because they want to change careers. So people who are coming out of other disciplines and decide that marketing is what they wish to do. It is also an interesting aspect that certainly from one of the research papers that I saw, that the majority of startups in the UK are started by people over 50. That in itself means that you're finding a lot more people who are doing marketing, because an entrepreneur and startup has got to market its organization, is now looking at a profile of 50 plus as the owners and the entrepreneurs, and they themselves will therefore necessarily be thinking about marketing from their perspective. So I think, yes, you're right. Marketing as an industry would be an interesting one to see where the profile is. Certainly there's a considerable weighting towards the younger marketplace in terms of education, but it is slowly shifting. I don't think it would necessarily shift significantly over 50%, because we are inherently a discipline which is about newness and innovation, and that tends to be something that young or younger people are more open to. I'm not saying older people aren't open to it, but are more open to it.
Because they're careful, Judge. But that if you have got a rise of people starting new businesses in their 50s, they have clearly seen a marketplace, they're clearly looking for something. And it's very easy to dismiss those as, oh, they're just lifestyle businesses. It's people and traditionally I think it was people who've been made redundant and set up their own businesses. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think there is a much more of an entrepreneurial movement.
Oh, I agree entirely. The mentoring that I do at the university, a good proportion of the people there are certainly over 45. And the general aspect is that, yes, they are looking at opportunities that they have seen, and it's not just a lifestyle business. Though there is that marketplace, as you quite rightly say. The other aspect, I think, is that people of our, or certainly my generation, have grown up with significant amount of change, and the result of which is that we are more comfortable than change than our parents and our grandparents used to be, where stability was the norm. And it is not unusual now to see people, queuing for the latest round of COVID vaccinations with smartphones in their hand, and perfectly au fait in using them. So I think the nature of society and its approaches has also changed, as well as the age profile has changed. So I think the aspect of customer psychology is something that is also worth thinking about, because we've got changes in the way in which people are now looking at what they expect from business as a result of their own experience, and that experience, of course, has also been fitted by experience of the COVID period. So we now have people who are looking for more space and safe space in the way in which they work and operate, and that has an implication for their interactions. We have people who want to work at home and stay at home. We've also got the element of health and fitness growing much more importantly in the psychology of the consumer marketplace. And so there are lots of opportunities to be seen by just surveying things such as social trends, as well as obviously the regional trends if you've got a regional business. So I think that there's quite a considerable amount of social change which is positive for marketers.
And I think before we finish, it's worth doing pointing out that this also affects B2B. I think there tends to be a huge assumption that anything to do with social is what you do in B2C, and it doesn't matter to those of us that work in sort of very formalised B2B marketplaces. It does. People buy from people. You're still selling to people. So the social changes, the social trends still matter.
I think that's very true. I think the other aspect, which is quite interesting from a marketer's perspective, is that a lot of people in the B2B world work from home for a portion of their time, the result of which is they are exposed to consumer media throughout the day, which they wouldn't have been at the office. The result of which is that social media and other media can carry business messages and get to business people whilst they're working from home. So there is, I think, a blurring of the lines between business and consumer media.
That's a very interesting point. Charles, lovely as ever to speak to you.
Pleasure. Nice to talk to you again, Kiran.